above the world so high, like a diamond in the sky. Then you show your little light. He could not see which way to go if you did not wink.
Isaac, make us whole again. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode of I'm Empathy. It's been well over a year since my last video game review, and I've been thinking about for ages what I'd love to review next, and I eventually came across the 2008 survival horror sci-fi third-person shooter known as Dead Space, which was released well over 10 years ago this year in October. It was developed by Visceral Games and published by EA back when they weren't expressing their true colours of greed to the gaming communities. Until recently, I'd only ever played the sequel Dead Space 2 and the Dead Space 3 demo, and I remember absolutely loving Dead Space 2, having completed it 4 or 5 times over, and the demo for Dead Space 3 I seem to really enjoy too. I saw it free on the Xbox Game Store, and I thought to myself, why the fuck not? Here's my thoughts and experience with the first Dead Space game. The year is set in 2508 and humanity has decided, fuck Earth, this planet has already been drained of all of our usefulness, let's go be greedy cunts on other worlds in the galaxy! The opening begins with a creepy rendition of Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, which gives you a bit of an unsettling feeling. You take the role of a space engineer known as Isaac Clarke, who's received a distress signal from the ship known as the Ishimura and has lost communications with them. Isaac is also a silent protagonist. I understand what Visceral Games is going for, I suppose, something like the original Halo trilogy with Master Chief perhaps, so you felt a little bit more immersed in the game, but with some of its harder hitting moments later on in the game, you think a regular person would at least say you know, something. In my opinion, the silent protagonist works a lot better in Halo because you're a badass super soldier who does speak in cutscenes, and the story is constructed in the context that's suitable for it, with characters such as Cortana, Sergeant Johnson, the Arbiter, etc. Here in Dead Space, I personally feel it doesn't work incredibly well. It's just because your two crew members, Kendra and Hammond, seem to just order you around to progress the story instead of just letting things flow a little bit better. Moving past that, you find Isaac's girlfriend Nicole aboard the Ishimura as well, and keeps playing back her last video message as he misses her, not because he said so, but because Kendra says so. They begin to dock, and the auto-dock malfunctions on the crew. You manage to survive along with the rest of your crew for now and begin investigating the Ishimura, but no less than 10 minutes into the actual game, you're already attacked by necromorphs, which are the infected humans as a result of a man-made artifact, which was also replicated after an alien artifact which was sealed off for study by humans known as the Red Marker, which sends people into madness, developing diseases and turns them into some ugly-ass motherfuckers. And to be honest, I was a little annoyed that they made their debut this early in the game and in such a manner, because I feel like the necromorphs could have tormented you a little bit more to build up more tension and mystery as to what's going on, but instead we're rushed into the action. There isn't too much more to the story other than it quickly becomes a mission to survive the outbreak and end up defeating the necromorphs, which is a bit of a shame, but it does put some things in place, some great set pieces, concepts, memorable moments, but I just wish that narrative was a bit more fleshed out to make up for the silent protagonist, as you really can't relate to Isaac until the sequel. Overall, the story is not by any means bad per se. It's borrowed from the best films in history of the genre, being stuff like Alien, Aliens, and I just feel like they could have enhanced some of the characters a little bit more to ground the characters. There are some video and audio logs you can find throughout the game to get more of a backstory on how the outbreak started, or even an emotion comic outside of the game explaining it in further detail, but I feel like you shouldn't have to do that in-game. If it's just to expand the lore, I don't mind, but it really could have been executed slightly better. At the end of the day, the narrative is still overall a good experience and worth the playthrough even just for that. Dead Space is a combination of being a sci-fi, third-person shooter, survival horror game, and for the most part, it utilises this very well. Instead of being one of those horror games where you just shoot an enemy in the head to kill them, Visceral Games just realise, hey, you see those things surrounding that person's head? Yeah, those things serve a purpose too. In this game, you're encouraged to dismember the limbs of necromorphs to slow them down and eventually kill them, which I might feel like I even enjoy way too much, but I don't care. It's satisfying. There's quite a few ways to achieve this, such as using guns, bashing them, curb stomping them, throwing them at things with kinesis, throwing things at them with kinesis, slowing them down with stasis to do anything I previously just said, and so on. You also have this badass armor set, which is called a rig, which you use to travel through space and zero gravity environments, which is really cool. You're even able to find schematics to add more armor and more slots to your inventory, as well as ones for ammo, new weapons, med packs, etc. It makes a lot of sense in the context of the story too, with being an engineer, just improvising and making do with something that can be used as a potential weapon. You can attain more powerful rig suits via the use of store in levels with the currency of in-game credits, which can be obtained from corpses, boxes, necromorphs, defeating bosses, and locked doors. You can also upgrade your weapons, rig, stasis, air capacity, and kinesis at a bench with power nodes, which again can be found by defeating bosses, in power boxes, and at stores, but are worth 10,000 credits. That's not too bad as far as balancing goes. What is a bit annoying is the difficulty, as my run through the game has been on easy mode, but it should still present some sort of challenge, as you shouldn't have to go back on the hardest difficulty to have the best experience whilst playing just because of a difficulty spike. It's a survival horror game plus a smattering of other genres to make the experience unique, I get that, but I did feel like it was a bit easy a lot of the time, unfortunately, which I'm glad they touched on a bit more as far as it goes in the sequel for Dead Space 2. But with this game, I only found myself dying on parts such as the asteroid part, where you have to go behind cover and wait for the asteroids to pass, as I wasn't aware of what was going on at the time. Also, the Hive Mind boss in particular at the end, which is a little bit underwhelming for such a build-up with a few minor encounters throughout the game. It's not an awful boss fight, it just could have been a little bit better in my opinion. One thing also as well, which isn't a total issue but is a bit strange in my opinion anyway, it feels like an open world and a linear path at the same time, with a mini hub world at the start of each chapter, but then having to go down different paths and backtracking slightly to get to new areas. It almost makes me wonder if during development they scrapped a few ideas and just adapted it to suit the other, but even I don't know which one it was. Overall, the gameplay is quite solid and a lot of fun. Despite some of these shortcomings, it makes for a very great, fun and intriguing experience. For a video game released back in 2008, it holds up incredibly well, for the most part, though sometimes when you zoom in on some of the textures they look a little bit off. But other than that, it looks incredible, particularly the lighting on the Ishimura when it reflects off your rig. The art style has a lot of dark colours, which really suit the tone of the game's themes and the atmosphere. The necromorphs look horrifically disfigured, as they rightfully should. The sound design is absolute top notch, with a flatline sound if a crew member dies, or if you die in space due to no oxygen. However, there's one thing that bothers me, and that is some of the dialogue and the music gets lost in how loud everything else can be at times, as the OST in this game is very badass, and also the necromorphs are a little bit predictable at times. Dismembering in the game feels that much more satisfying, also just because of how amazing it looks in the game. And no, I'm no psychopath, I swear, and if you say any different, I'll kill you! So yeah, the presentation is nothing short of fantastic. Also, having your health displayed on your spine is pretty fucking cool. With the lack of heads-up display, everything coming out of your rig, such as your map, even though you don't really use it because you can have a locator, but anyway, who gives a fuck, it looks sick. Dead Space is a great game and preserves some great building blocks for even more potential, which it certainly delivers in on the sequel, which was great. While I do find things in this game that do piss me off a bit, it's mainly overshadowed by the positives. And so on that note, Dead Space 1 gets 7 out of 10. Now on that note, I'd like to say thanks for tuning in, I hope you enjoyed it, be sure to leave a like, subscribe and share. Hope you all have a fucking ripper.